Hello, everybody. It's Mike with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions, etc. So happy winter solstice for those of you who acknowledge such. I mean, how can you? It's like a thing, right? It's part of nature. It is the longest night of the year, and it will kick off the official winter season. Those of you who have been saying it's winter for the last month or two, quite incorrect. It actually has been autumn the entire time until now. Anyway, this video is about, well, first of all, let me preface by the last video I did, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 days ago. I said that I was probably going to come out with a series of little videos for Savage Kingdoms 4th Edition to kind of promote it, talk a little bit about it, and all that kind of stuff. So I was just going to do these little videos here and there, and this is the first of that series. And I'm just going to cover these different little aspects of Savage Kingdoms 4th Edition that might be, especially if they might be different than other game systems. And I'll cover stuff that isn't necessarily different as well, but just little aspects of the game system and the setting. So today's video on the winter solstice that I'm filming this, will be about the basic game mechanics of Savage Kingdoms. So those of you who have played Savage Kingdoms before know that it's a D20. It's all D20 based. So it's not a D20 system in the sense of a Wizards of the Coast copyrighted game system, although it can still be used. It is a D20 system. So, in fact, it uses all D20s. Everything is a D20. We don't use D4s, D6s, D8s, D10s, D12s, D17s, D30s, none of that. Everything is figured out on one D20. That was a design choice I had 12 years ago with the first edition, because I playing with a lot of new players here and there. I've been doing this for a while. I also run games for a lot of kids, a lot of youth. I really get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And I think they get a lot of enrichment, I believe. And so these observations throughout the years of people kind of getting confused with the different dice systems, as much as we like all the different dice, to be honest, it's very confusing to some of the newer players and kids and such, which happen often to be the same, new kids coming into the hobby. So I came up with this D20 base system that everything runs off of a D20. Every single skill roll, skill check, attribute check, what's not, spell casting, everything runs off of a D20. So how does that work exactly, Mr. Mike? Well, so SK, like I said, everything is a D20 roll. So if you're asked by the game master in this during gameplay, hey, make a perception skill roll, that's technically what it's called, a skill roll. You can call it a check or a test if you want. In Red Sun, I called die rolls tests because you were testing to see if you would succeed at this thing, right? So you can call it whatever you want to, but officially they are called skill rolls. But for example, here, if you the game master says make a perception skill roll, perhaps based on the fact that you were describing narratively that my character is scanning the forest or searching this chest or whatever, he or she would probably say make a perception skill roll, and you would do so using a d20, and you just add your modifier to it, just like in D&D and Pathfinder, a lot of other game systems. In order to hit a target number. The target number in Savage Kingdoms is known as a difficulty rating. In the past 3 editions, it was called a DL, which means difficulty level. For whatever reason, I changed it to DR, the system, just to be obnoxious, I guess. No, I just wanted to make a little tiny tweak to it. So it's called a DR, at least right now in the playtesting. Maybe I'll change it back, but it's probably going to be DR. And I got that from when I was creating my Red Sun system. Difficulty rating, I don't know why, I just kind of liked it. Just rolls off the tongue better. It also kind of segues into defense rating. So because they're both a DR, a target number that you have to hit, right? So you roll the d20, trying to get a target number. That's usually anywhere from, usually it's from 10 to 25. Sometimes it might be DR 5, which would be something, a very simple task, right? It might even be a DR 30 if it's something that's really difficult. And in the book, there's like a little listing of what they mean. DR 15 is kind of average. DR 10 is like for an easy task. 5, like I said, would be called very easy or very simple. I forgot whatever I called it in the little table. 20 would be, I think it's called tough, might be the category. 25 is like extreme, I think, and 30 is like, I think it's called nearly impossible. Anyway, sometimes it might even be higher or lower, but usually it's going to be in that 10 to 25, maybe 10 to 30 range, depending on how difficult the task is. So, we'll say it was an average difficulty in this scenario, perception roll, DR 15, the player rolls a 12 and looks down at his or her character sheet and sees that they have +4 in perception, and they got a 16, so therefore a success. There's an optional rule in the new system, and I think I might have included in 3rd edition as well, that if you succeed right on the DR, the difficulty rating, or in combat, the defense rating, same again, segue, same thing, then you have a mixed success. So you succeed, but some little minor issue occurs, and this is optional. And the reason I don't want to make it an official rule is because it can be a little naggy. Not that it happens that much, because you have to roll right on the DR. That might happen like once a session on average, maybe twice if you're doing a lot of die rolls, and probably in many cases 0 times. But it's a fun little thing if you would like to have it. It would be an example of that would be like losing an arrow out of your quiver, just some kind of minor thing that doesn't equal a critical failure, which I'll get to in a second. So yeah, or in combat, maybe you. This is where it gets trickier because I have a critical failure chart for various combat skills such as brawling or ranged weaponry or melee weaponry or whatever. And some of these things are that you slip and fall, or you lose a piece of equipment, your helmet falls over your eyes, you lose your weapon, whatever. So you must be careful if you're going to use the mixed success option, and make sure that if there is a tiny little thing, don't make it as bad as the critical failure, right? So it's not a critical failure, right? You technically succeeded, just with a small consequence. That's why it's optional. So yeah. Advise, approach attention on caution if you decide to use it. So let's see. Furthermore about the system. So yeah, you're rolling d20 for everything. In combat, so this is the big question that comes up. So people are like, well, how do you roll damage? Like, so if you make an attack roll, you're using the d20, like in a lot of games, and you're hitting a target number. We get all of that. So if you succeed in the target number, say the opponent's defense was 17, and you did roll, say you rolled a 19 with your melee weapon, or say you're using a melee weapon in this case, so that would be your attack roll using that skill. If you rolled a 19 and the defense was 17, you score 2 points of damage, right? So you don't have to roll different damage dice. You don't have to be like, oh, I got to roll a d4, that was a dagger attack, d8 for a longsword, whatever. So the difference, you exceed the defense rating of your opponent. That's the base amount of damage. The reason I say base is there's a couple little caveats here, because so far it seems really fast, right? Your single die roll, you can already tell how much damage is done so much faster than having to roll a bunch of damage dice. That's kind of the point of it. But there are a couple little caveats that you have to remember. So every weapon type has a maximum damage rating. So you can't somehow luckily score like 30 points of damage with your dagger. That would be really hard anyway, and you would have to explode a 20, which I'll get to in a second. Remind me of that. And so every weapon, for example, daggers have a maximum damage rating of 10. And these are base. If you have a master crafted dagger, it goes up by 5. But say an average quality typical weapon of a dagger would be maximum damage 10. Short swords, for example, are 15. Spears are 15. A regular hunting spear, maximum damage 20 is a long sword, and a war spear, which is a big reach of 2 yards, two-handed spear. Well, you can use it one-handed if you want as well. But if you use it two-handed, you get armor piercing, which is an extra point of damage, which I'll get to in a second as well. All the way up to battle axe doing 20, I believe, and a great axe can do up to 25 maximum points of damage. So how do you get maximum 25, for example? Well, you would have to score 25 over the defense rating of your opponent, which sounds really, really difficult. And it is. That's kind of the point, right? If you're scoring 25 points of damage, that cuts through the average person easily. Like, that kills them instantly. And the way I would describe that is probably a decapitation, or a deep cut into down the clavicle into the sternum or something. Obviously a very kind of a gory, critical kill, right? Because the average person in SK has it really is like 10 health, but if you really kind of average it out, it's probably more like 11 or 12 health points. And you don't get like giants amount of hit points per level advancement in this case. So you can't really hide behind your hit points in Savage Kingdom. It's a little more realistic, quote unquote. a little grittier. That's kind of that was the point. That was the design choice. So you have to be careful. So the way you would score 25, to use our example, is you would have, if you roll a natural 20 on the d20 roll, you get to, it explodes, meaning you get to roll again and add that result to the original result, while also adding your skill modifier. But you only do that once. So for example, you roll a natural 20, you were +5 in whatever weapon or brawling that you're, whatever skill they were using to attack with. That would be a 25, right? Roll a d20 good, so you get a 12. That's a 37. So 37 against, say, of a defensive only like 10, that would be 27 points of damage right there. So that's how you do it. Or in this case, 25, you would max out. So you can't go over that. Another cool thing about exploding 20s, or not necessarily even with exploding 20, is that you can get a what's called a critical success. Critical success is if you score a 20 higher than the DR or defense rating, if it's combat, the difficulty rating. So in our example we just did, say against DR10, then you rolled a 37, that would be a critical success because you scored way above 20, right? It would even be a critical success even up to against DR17 in this case, 37. So that's how you can, in combat, score a lot of damage, but also in other skills and in combat, you can, there's, each skill has a listing of what would happen for a critical success or basically suggestions and critical failures. So combat skills go even a little bit further, as well as combat skills like brawling, melee weaponry, and range weaponry. Those are kind of the three physical ways that you attack, that you interact with the game system. Brawling is anything unarmed, a grapple, a punch, a kick. Melee weaponry is probably obvious, anything that is a wielded manufactured weapon. And range weaponry is any ranged or missile attack, right? Whether it's throwing a spear or a javelin or loosing an arrow or firing a crossbow bolt or whatever it is, a sling stone or something. So those are the three main skills. If you critically succeed in one of those, there's a nice little fun chart on each one of those skills: brawling, melee weaponry, range weaponry, that you roll on. And like I said kind of earlier in the video, you can do things like knock somebody's helmet off, or knock their teeth out and stun them for a moment, or gouge one of their eyes out, at least temporarily. Well, not temporarily, but like partial blindness for a moment, or any number of things. There's a not only a fun chart, but it's also kind of gritty and somewhat realistic. It is based on what would happen in medieval combat. It's not weapon specific, unfortunately. I didn't want to bog the system down. Maybe if I produce another book later on with extra rules, maybe I'll do some stuff like that. But I didn't want to bog the system down. The whole point of the combat system of Savage Kingdoms is that it's supposed to be, it's pretty fast, right, and kind of gritty and exciting. And through years of running Savage Kingdoms and the playtest of 4th edition, even more so, it definitely works. People, I noticed a big difference between people at the table for Savage Kingdoms and people for Dungeons and Dragons, because I run that as too. Well, not for adults, but for youth players. And the energy level often is very higher for Savage Kingdoms combat, because you have to kind of stay focused. It's a little more exciting. It runs a little faster. But I'll go into that more a little bit later. So just kind of finishing up the video on the basic game mechanics. So D20, everything runs off of that. If you roll a natural 20, it explodes, meaning that you roll again. You only add your modifier once, though, not both times on the D20. And to that, also to finish out on that note, you can only, in previous editions, if you rolled a natural 20 again on the exploding die, you exploded yet again. And that was kind of cool and kind of exciting. Very rare, obviously, but it did happen several times. But the math got kind of ridiculous and silly, and it was almost like kind of a moot point at that point. So it is now capped. As an optional rule, certainly you could do it in 4th edition, but it's now capped to where if you roll another 20 again on the exploding die, it doesn't explode anymore. It stops there. So you would add, in this case, 40 to whatever the bonus is. Very, 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 very likely to succeed. A 99.9% chance. I'm sure you would succeed at that point. And whatever you're doing, it probably a critical success at that. But what you get for that is you get a point of luck. So you get +1 to your luck, because I figure game design wise, you are favored by some power at that point, by some god or ancestor, or maybe it's just sheer luck yourself. Luck is a mechanic which I'll talk to in another video. That does pretty cool stuff. And within the story, it's luck is more of the word kind of based in the more what ancient people more called it, particularly the Vikings, where like nowadays in modern speak we go, oh, you're lucky, meaning that there was no skill involved and you just kind of stumbled into something. Luck in kind of back in those times and ancient times and many cultures, particularly like the Vikings, that really kind of meant favored of the gods. You were favored by something, and yes, they might have joked like, "Oh, you stumbled on the ground and stabbed this guy in the face. Well, you were lucky," but they're really kind of saying that something favored you there. So yeah, just a little side note there. So yeah, if you two back-to-back natural 20s after exploding 20, and then the follow-up is a 20, you get +1 to your luck, which is cool. Luck is a pretty valuable resource in this setting and system. The other thing about the D20 system, so the opposite of the critical successes are critical failures. And the way you can get a critical failure is if you roll a natural 1, you add your bonus, assuming you have one, or whatever modifier there is. We'll say in this case it's +6. So you got a 7. You re-roll the die, and if it is, you re-roll the die, so it's an imploding 1. So, right, you got an exploding 20. So this is called an imploding 1 system. Kind of jokingly and funny, but literally that's actually what it's called. So if you were to roll a 12, which means you end up with a -5 in this case, that is a critical failure. So any result that is 0 or less is a critical failure. So it's a nice, neat little system. Everything's based on a 20, like 20 above the DR is a critical success, and a 0 or less on the D20 result is a critical failure. And by the way, so you do not necessarily have to score an exploding 20 to get a critical success. If you can naturally get 20 above what you need, and I've seen it fairly, somewhat often, that's still a critical success. You don't necessarily have to explode the 20. In other words, roll again. And imploding 1, too, this happens, it's not really often, but it's happened a few times where somebody is -2 at this particular skill, maybe because they are really bad at it, maybe because they're fatigued or staggered. These are conditions that can lower your die rolls. And they rolled a 2 and they have -2 and they got a 0. That's a critical failure as well. So yeah, pretty cool system. Obviously, the worst thing you want to do is roll a natural 1 followed by a 20, because that's -19, right? Well, which will pretty much always critically fail unless you're really, really good at something and you have a bunch of conditions stacked in your favor. And I'll speak about conditions in later videos, but pretty much that's it. Everything's a D20, so just remember D20. Oh, and by the way, before I finish the video, because this comes up a lot, I was talking about skill checks, right? So not every time you roll a D20 is necessarily a skill check. There are luck checks in the game as well. I use them fairly often before I made them an official rule. Whereas you can have somebody roll a D20 plus their current luck, and if they succeed against the DR, which is usually 10, but it might be 15 if it's something, they would succeed at whatever lucky task. And this is usually for like somebody forgot to bring something with them, and they're like, you know what, I kind of feel like I would have got it. So I might say, well, make a luck check, see if you remember to take your spear with you. Yes, PC should be describing narratively that they're doing that, but we all miss little things like there. Or even better, like would I happen to be in the city when this is happening with this other character? And you can be like, if you're not real sure, you can be like, make a luck roll, and if you succeed, you happen to be in that area to help out that other player character in whatever situation it was. Just some examples right there. But another thing that comes up, you would roll as initiative, right? Initiative is not a skill technically. It is a derived trait. It's derived from agility plus willpower. Certain talents give you some boost in there as well, such as tactician and kind of like reflexes. So you can critically succeed initiative. You roll a natural 20, and you re-roll, explode the 20, right? If you score 20 above your opponent's initiative, right, because again, 20 above the DR, so in this case, the opponent's initiative is the difficulty rating, then you have critically succeeded in initiative, meaning that you get 4 actions in the opening round of combat. So, yeah, very cool. And then after round 2 and after that, it goes back to 3 actions. And I'll get to the 3 action system later. But that's enough for now. Thanks for checking in. Happy solstice, and talk to you guys again soon.